Hey guys, this is your host, Kofi Thompson here. Welcome to another episode of Breaking the Glass Ceiling. So I am super excited for this show today. I got my man EJ, if you guys don't know him, Eugene Jacobs. And man, dude, it has been quite a journey. Like we met, in this group called The Standard, a couple months ago. Really just like a great group of guys that are all like, focused on making sure that they're improving their lives spiritually, emotionally, mentally, physically, and financially. And we just kind of hit it off. Like I really appreciate just like the authenticity that you live your life. So you, EJ, please introduce yourself to our guests.
Likewise, brother, man. Definitely appreciate the time. But to your guest, my name is EJ, also known as Eugene Jacobs. I am a systems lead at a Fortune 100 company. In my off time, I am leading the DMV events for our standard community, like Kofi mentioned. Also studying to be the best physical fitness trainer I can be. And yeah, I feel like that's kind of what I'm doing nowadays,
I love it. I love it. Well, thanks again for coming on the show. So today we're going to be diving into a pretty interesting topic, and we've had many conversations about this, like the area of like dating, really finding, the right partner, navigating all of the different, ways in which we've been, wrongly taught about dating, the misinformation, the miseducation that's out there, and really like navigating this very important space because, finding a partner in life is like a huge part of life. Like if you
big one,
you didn't
big
know,
one.
like, it's not all about the things you have. It's really about the people that are around you and the relationships you're able to cultivate. So like I want to dive right into it because we've had so many conversations, so many interesting things. And just like looking at this space of like dating and like, men that are out there trying their best to make sure that they're improving their careers and, doing what they need to do, like physically, financially, and professionally. Like, what do you feel like, most guys kind of get wrong when it comes to dating and women, or in your experience?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, man. I mean, I would totally say that the modern trope is money and muscles, right? I think I
Mm-hmm.
think I think that's what a lot of guys get wrong. And I mean, like selfishly too, like I thought like that was it to getting the girl. I mean, we're kind of conditioned on social media, on movies, right? Of like, hey, you drive the nice whip, you got the muscles, like you're gonna get the girl, right? But I
Yeah.
think I think what most guys get wrong is that when they're looking for a healthy relationship, that might get you in the door at first, but it's not going to be able to retain that relationship,
Mm-hmm.
especially if that woman's healthy, if that woman is also looking for a relationship. You got to put in the work emotionally. You got to
Yeah.
be a man of integrity. You got to have character. You got to be able to do the things that you say you're going to do.
Mm.
That to me makes the woman trust your masculine core. And I think that's probably one of the biggest things that people, especially guys today in this age, miss.
That is wow. That is so freaking true, man. Like, we see all these examples of these guys, right? They're driving nice cars or looking nice, and we're like, okay, that must be it, right? That must be the trick. But the reality is it's like it's so much deeper than that. And it's just like if you meet someone, like they may look great, but if they have no depth to their personality, if they, don't have things that are like deeper that you can really form like a, great bond with, like that person is just going to look good at face value. Like they may have a good resume, but then when they start working, like you're going to see,
Yeah,
there's
no,
really nothing deeper than that in that regard.
that's 100%, man. And I mean, I would say it goes both ways as well
Mm,
because I think also for guys they might mistake a woman's beauty with their integrity and their
mm,
character, right? So I think it
mhm,
comes down to a lot of I don't know. I think it comes down to, like I said, we got social media, we got,
Yeah.
beautiful women everywhere, right? But I mean, at the end of the day, like you said, I mean, if somebody's kind of hollow on the inside, if they haven't done the work to kind of uh, handle their emotional traumas, their emotional triggers,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and that woman also doesn't say what she is going to do, and things of that nature, then I think men kind of tend to just look at the beauty and not vet appropriately. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that's where they also get themselves into, a lot of trouble. Um, so yeah, that's some of
Yeah.
the things that I think on both sides. I don't want to bash men, and
Yeah.
all that stuff
Yeah.
like that, because I know that we're always holding ourselves accountable to be able to do the work. But I also think it's a woman's journey too.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I feel like, a huge portion of this that I've realized is just understanding the differences between males and females. I feel like, just as a guy, like, and especially like, going in and becoming a professional, like, we learn a lot of things about, how we should, optimally perform like as a professional. And usually from a guy standpoint, like all of it like is like pretty logical. That's just how our brains are made up. We're like, you know, 1 + 1 = 2. But
Yeah.
understanding that, like, yeah, females are different. Like they, there are differences that you have to make sure that you're acknowledging and you're aware of if you really want to be able to, one, track the right person and cultivate, a really great relationship beyond there. And then like, one thing that I've really found to be like, I feel like something I struggled with for a while is that like I feel like a lot of guys here like, oh yeah, girls want like an asshole, right? They're like, yeah, like you
Nah.
gotta be an asshole to like get the right girl. You gotta, you know, you gotta not be nice and all those things like that. And like I remember hearing that and like that was like so against my character because I'm naturally like a nice guy. Like, I'm naturally like a caring,
Yeah.
compassionate person. So it was so against my character. So I don't know, like, have you ever like did you grow up like and hear that and like how was that?
100%. 100%. I think there's a lot of guys that fall into this this trope of, oh, I gotta be the nice guy, like then I'll get her to like me, right? But I think
Mhm.
the difference, what I people have called me very nice, and I know that I was nice kind of growing up, but I think there's a huge difference between being a nice guy and being a good guy, right? And I
Mm-hmm.
think there's a differentiation between the two. I would say nice guys tend to put their needs towards the back burner, and they'll go
Mm-hmm.
against those needs in an effort to win over either a girl that they're pursuing, or whoever that they're pursuing, right?
Yeah.
And I think a good guy is somebody who takes care of themselves first, but also fills others' cup along the way. And I
Mm-hmm.
think people tend to kind of misconstrue those two. And some people and some women, you might hear some women say, oh, like I want a nice guy. I want him to wine me. I want him to dine me. Like that's not all important at the beginning stages, of the courtship, right? But
Mm-hmm.
I think when women say that, I would say that they probably mean that they want a good guy, meaning that they can't necessarily run them over and kind of create a doormat. Like there's got to be some
Yeah.
boundaries, that good guy really sets, that kind of keeps the attraction going. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I've found that like, got like a healthy woman doesn't want someone that's an asshole. Like they want someone that they can, form a good relationship with and that is gonna make them also feel like safe and secure. Like, and
Yeah.
if I've found in my own experience, like, the women that may not be attracted to or may be attracted to that person that like demeans them or doesn't isn't really nice to them, like there may be some healing that may need to be done in that person's life to really have like, to be in a healthy relationship and actually like, be with someone that's really worthy of them. And then on the other side of that too, like I realize that like being nice doesn't mean you don't have boundaries. Like it's important. Like you can be like a good guy has boundaries and he's going to stand by those boundaries and not let those things like be overridden just because he is attracted to a person Like, and if
Yeah.
that's like, for example, if you have a boundary of like, you know, you don't necessarily go out and like drink on like weekdays, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you go out with a girl and like, or a guy, this goes on both sides, and that person wants to go out and like, party. Like, don't sit there and like not honor yourself and not honor your own boundaries just to get the approval of someone else. And I think that's
Yeah.
like such a big point. Like, when you do things for the approval of others, it just never works out.
No, not at all. Not at all. When you go against your true inner core, or just your own truth, people also sense that. They
Mm-hmm.
feel like you're not. They feel like you're not 100% in it.
Mm-hmm.
They kind of feel a little bit of distance, and I think like that's what causes, especially women, to test a guy, like, to test them, like, oh, like, are you really living up to your truth? Do you really want to be here? Do you really want to be
Mm-hmm.
here on a Wednesday night, until 12 o'clock? Like, so nah, man, I think that the boundary setting is totally key.
Yeah. Yeah,
For sure.
absolutely. And another thing that like I realize is so important when it comes to like dating and finding the right person. And I say this like I'd say it applies a little bit more to guys, because guys are usually the ones that are going out there and asking for the dates and putting themselves out there. Is like being really comfortable with rejection. Like, and I really find that like that's true for just success in dating, but success in life in general. Like,
Yeah.
I've had conversations with guys and they're like, man, like this is like, I just, can't find the right person. This girl I was talking to, it, went wrong and like all these different things. And they have this like kind of defeatist, mentality. They're like, it's just never going to work out for me. And then I talked to them. They're like, yeah, like I talked to like one girl in the last 6 months. I'm like, well, like,
Yeah. Like, where are you at?
you're not gonna just like you're not just gonna find the right person the first person you ask. Like, this doesn't
Yeah.
happen.
Yeah, no, 100%, man. I mean, it's not like meeting somebody. It's not like the Kool-Aid man, breaking down your wall and being like, "Yo, I'm here. Like, come take me out." You know what I'm saying? Especially women, because we do live in a society where it's expected for the man to, approach, start the courtship off. So yeah, I mean, I totally get that, but I think when a guy actually has the abundance mentality, when he's living in his true purpose, when he's allowed himself to feel successful repetitions of his life,
Mhm.
that ultimately makes him confident enough to just go out, meet people, and hey, if you get rejected, oh, hey, you're too short or you're too whatever, like it doesn't bother him because he knows that there's another bus 15 minutes down the road. You know what I'm
Mhm.
saying? And I think that's the kind of place where a lot of the guys that we talk to and help, like they got to get to that spot. I think rejection kind of hurts a lot of people because they feel like that's like the end of the world. And I used to be
Mhm.
that. I used to be that way too.
Oh yeah.
So I think
I
it's kind of a
remember I
learned
remember
behavior.
crying. Like, I think the first breakup I had was like in eighth grade, and I think I cried on my floor for like 4 hours. I was like, it's the end of the world. Never gonna
Granted, you were
yeah.
granted you were in eighth grade though, man. We were still trying to find ourselves back then.
Man, that's hilarious. So, what have you found to be like, really some of the qualities that women are actually attracted to in a man?
Oh, the question was, what do I think the qualities are that women are attracted to in a man?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay, yeah. Um, I would definitely, I would definitely say. Now, is this in dating or is this in relationships? Because I find those two to be slightly different.
Let I want to go in both ways. So yeah, let's go with dating first, and then I'd like to slide into relationships and kind of hear your differing, thoughts on those two.
Yeah, for sure. So dating, I would say the number one thing that women are attracted to, in my personal experience, is confidence, right?
Mm-hmm.
But confidence in a way that facilitates getting to know somebody, right? So when I say confidence, I don't necessarily mean you go out on the date, you brag about your accomplishments, your accolades, your Lambo, whatever you got. You
Mm-hmm.
know what I'm saying? I think it's being able to it's being able to kind of show up competently, but facilitate that conversation ask her questions, get to know her better, know that like you're kind of more interested in her versus her body or her features, right? I think like those things go a long way when you first start to date, when the courtship kind of starts to happen. So I think number one is confidence. Do you take care of yourself? Do you work out? That's a huge thing. I'd say just emotionally confident in general. Like, are you willing to have, conversations that might be a little bit hard? I mean, I think that kind of goes into relationships as well. But I think just kind of knowing who you are as a person so that they can sense, hey, like, I feel safe with him. You know what I'm saying? I think those would be some of the initial things that I guess women look for.
Yeah, that's so true. Like I believe confidence is one thing that like is truly important. And there's a big difference between confidence and arrogance. When you're confident, like you are comfortable with who you are, you're comfortable with, talking about the things like and dislike, and like you're not really afraid to like, present yourself to the world. But you don't necessarily just like go out there and say, oh yeah, I'm really braggadocious. These are the things I have, and I'm going to, act like I know these things that I really have no experience in.
Yes.
And I think it's so important to like know that big difference there, because like arrogance is very unattractive.
Yeah.
When someone's confident, you can tell, hey, this person's comfortable with where they are and where they're at and where they're going. And, oftentimes, in traditional relationships, like women want to be with a guy that knows where they're going.
Yeah.
Where they're at.
100%. I think the one thing that I want to add to that too is I heard a really good phrase the other day, and it was discovery over disclosure, right? And I think that goes back to that guy that's on that first date, and he's just like, oh yeah, like I'm a CEO of blah blah blah, like I got a Lambo, I got a $5 million house, like that kind of stuff, right? I feel like women in particular, it's not like they don't care, but I would say that they would much rather be in a love story and try to find that stuff out over time versus you just kind of throwing that out there, because it sounds like it sounds initially like a ploy to like a bribe for sex, essentially. You know what I'm saying? So I think like discovery over disclosure, I think is a huge thing when it comes to that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I really appreciate what you said about, there's the way you take care of yourself. Like making sure that you're like, doing the basics, like, showing up nice.
Oh yeah.
Shower, being there, being presentable. It's just like the same thing. Like you go to a job, for example, like you're not going to show up there in ripped jeans and a t-shirt. Like that's just what's the impression that you're giving off to that person. And then especially when it comes to like how you treat your body, like, I heard this really interesting idea about just like working out and what that means, and I want to share it. It was actually on a podcast, but they're talking about like how working out, like your body is like your identifier of your values and the types of values it takes to actually build that body up.
100%.
When you're in shape, like you're showing to the world that you're industrious, you're a hard worker, you're conscientious, like you have self-agency, like you have the ability to do hard things when no one is working. So, all of that, like, manifests itself like into a physically fit body. So like, if you're like, if someone is looking at you and they just see, yeah, like this person's fit, like they kind of understand, okay, this is the type of person that like, most likely when they're faced with a challenge, they're probably going to be also dependable. They're probably gonna be trustworthy because like they do the work. And you
100%.
So like, that's why, I mean, in my life, I've found it. I mean, and there's so many other benefits in addition to being physically fit. So in addition to like, confidence, and there's a lot of things there, but also, working out as well too. What do you feel like are other qualities, men should be focusing on outside of, just like, being financially well, to really cultivate like a good, really be or could become the person that can be in a good, great long-term relationship, with the right woman?
100%, man. I would definitely say men got to work on their emotional state. They got to work on it, man. Figure out what your traumas are, why, pretty much doing the self work to figure out how you tick. You know what I'm saying? So if something keeps bothering you and you haven't been able to figure that out, and you just kind of let it ball up, and then that one event happens with a girl and you don't figure out why you're triggered, like I think that's something that kind of blows up a relationship. So I think being able to
Mm-hmm.
work out on the trauma. So like let's just say, for example, you had a, I don't know, like a domineering mother or something like that, and you weren't able to kind of reconcile with her. Like that trauma is going to come up in a relationship at some point, you know? And life has this funny way of bringing all of these challenges to you until you actually solve it. It's going to keep repeating itself.
Oh
So,
yeah.
you know, so I think definitely doing the emotional work is definitely a big part of it. Um,
Mm.
yeah,
Mm. Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with that. And, I find that to be true. Like, I see like business and dating as very similar. And I find that like it is like in life, it's so important. This is one thing that like I believe is becoming more talked about, but just it still isn't prevalent. But for men to make sure that they're improving their emotional IQ, like make sure
yeah,
that they're doing these things because, just as you mentioned, like if you're have past traumas, if you have the past experiences, like you may not realize how that's showing up. Like for example, like in my own life, like I grew up in a household like where my parents weren't really doing that well. They had like mental health, they suffered from mental health problems.
mm,
Financially, they weren't in the greatest spaces, so I was often like trying to fix things as a child or try to make them feel better. I didn't really have the tools or the knowledge back then. So I just
yeah,
kind of do what I could, right? So I developed kind of more so of like a helper mindset towards the connections I had. Like if I was in a relationship with somebody, I want to be able to like help them out. And
yeah,
I realized years ago that in the past I was subconsciously attracted to people that were hurt or people
yeah,
were damaged in some way. And I realized like I would go and seek out people that like I saw potential in.
yep, yep.
Because I was like, oh, I can fix them. I can, I can,
Ooh,
I
you hit
can
on
do all,
something.
yeah, right. You're like, oh wow, I just need to show them the right books. I just need to have this conversation with them or whatever it is. And
100%.
like I didn't realize that was like a past trauma for mine. I didn't realize that like, hey, if I'm attracted to these people, but the relationships end up never working out because, as we know, we can't change people.
Yes,
Um,
100%.
and yeah, like those things, like what you're attracted to, like how you react in different situations, all of those things are so important to be aware of because, like, ultimately like if things aren't really going well, like we're the only common denominator.
Yes, yes. That is so true, man. I also appreciate you sharing that. Like talking to you, like it sounds like you've done the work to understand your traumas and I think the biggest thing is self-awareness too. I think a
Mm-hmm.
lot of people tend to be scared of diving into those triggers, but I think it's just becoming self-aware and knowing what your outcome is. If you want a better relationship for yourself, you have to put in the work to kind of heal yourself. And
Mm-hmm.
when you are healed, you're going to ultimately attract that person that is also healed. And I think that's when both of you fill each other's cups. And
Mm-hmm.
that's the basically the foundation of a great relationship. When two people are full and they're filling each other's cups, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So I love that point, man. That's a great point.
Absolutely. It should be, a collaboration. Like you guys should be lifting each other up
Yeah.
in a relationship. So, when it comes to like, seeking a partner like as a male, um, you know, I, just because of social media and society, right? We're always just attracted to the looks. We're like, man, I just want, that that 10, the girl that's just looks amazing,
Yep.
all the things. But what have you found to be other important qualities when it comes to cultivating a real, long-term beneficial relationship outside of just looks?
Yeah, no, that's a really great question, man. I mean, I would say for me, it's like also know who you are and who you come or where you come from, right? So I look at myself and I'm a very family oriented person. And I had a really great family growing up. So I always kind of wanted somebody to also be family oriented, like my partner to be family oriented. And I think another thing that I've also heard is, especially when it comes down to women, is what is their relationship with their fathers, right? How do they treat their
Very important.
fathers? How do they talk about their fathers? How do they talk about their brothers, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because essentially, and I've been out on dates before where I've got a hint or inclination of just kind of like a bad relationship with masculinity in general.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what I've come to realize is a lot of women who tend to have bad relationships with their fathers or non-existence relationships, they don't have a trust in men, right? And it comes
Mm-hmm.
out through their body language, it comes out through what they're saying or how they're addressing you. So I think for me, like when I was dating, I'm in a relationship now, but when I was dating, I was definitely looking for how do they treat and how do they talk about their father? Do they revere them or do they fear them? Or were they just non-existent? So I think that's a factor for me. So that's number one. Number two, let's see. Number two, I would say they have to also be able to take care of themselves, right? So
Mm-hmm.
just from like a physical aspect as well, like I know you kind of mentioned the tens, and I know guys like us, we're very visual creatures or whatever, but hey, like you don't have to be perfect, right? You don't have to be perfect, but like, do you put in the work to take care of yourself? Do you go to the gym? Do you exercise? Like that's a huge thing to me. So I definitely want to make sure that like I have that in a partner as well.
Mm-hmm.
So those are two big things, but curious as to also what you look for in a partner.
Yeah. So what actually recently came up for me was actually the relationship with your father. That is actually a really important piece. And that's actually not something I really put much thought towards
Mm,
only until I'd say like maybe 6 months ago.
mm-hmm.
Um, but like I realized how much that will dictate like what their relationship with you is,
Yes.
especially if they have not done like the healing work. I think that like if someone is on a path of healing and they're aware, then things can go well. But if they're not really aware and they're just like kind of operating on that subconscious level, not understanding how that relationship impacts their behaviors, it
Mm-hmm.
can really have a huge impact on the relationship. Because yeah, if you have that don't have a great relationship with your father, that's oftentimes going to show up in the relationship that you have with other men, down the road. Another big thing for me is like the ability to, be compassionate and be like, have like kind of a nurturing soul.
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
Like for me, like I really find that, attractive when, because I'm like, I feel like I've become a little bit more traditional in what I seek in a relationship, wanting someone that, is like, I want to be more of a provider. I want the woman that I end up with and eventually marry to be more of a caretaker and really
Mm,
a family. So for me, like, having the quality of being nurturing and caretaking is something I really find attractive. Cause I'm like, okay, this is someone that like, yeah, like if I have like a terrible day, like they're going to be able to, you know,
mm-hmm.
not like do all the things, but to be able to, make me feel better and kind of take their mind off of like maybe the current task and, switch roles to more nurturing. When we eventually have children, like they're going to be able to really pour into them, in the right way so that they can grow up in a healthy, way. And I feel like to be, nurturing and caretaking, like you can't be too selfish to do that. And I feel like, especially the
Mm,
like what Instagram has created, that whole culture has created a lot of like narcissism.
100%, man. Oh my
like
God.
like it like, and I see it like, and I realized, I was like, wow, like I in my opinion, what I've seen from a lot of women is that, like, if they're on social media taking pictures and they're getting all this attention from guys, just naturally it's going to create a lot of like narcissistic tendencies to like really be focused more so on like you not really thinking about the other people, how different things that you do may impact someone else.
Yeah.
So for me, like, really, um you know being with somebody that is not necessarily just like completely selfless, like understands self-preservation, but has those qualities to be like, okay, like during this time it's important to take the viewpoint off of me and place on someone else, because this is something that this person needs.
Yeah.
And I'd say another thing for me that I do find like attractive in women would be like depth, like in character, and
Mm.
and intelligence, and like who they are like as a person. Um so that for me, like I realize that, like, I just like, if someone is just a pretty face, like I just not like, it's gonna be boring.
Yeah.
Like, I you don't necessarily have to be at the same, you know reading the same books, at the same intellectual level, but like having something that you're like a bit passionate about, or that you like or enjoy, and being able to like talk about those things, to me
Yeah.
is like very attractive, because it shows that, like, yeah, there is something out there that you care, about, and you're willing to dive into. And it really doesn't matter what it is, but like just
Yeah.
knowing that you are a passionate person, that's something that's really important to me. And then the last thing that really comes to mind for me is self-awareness, like that.
Mm.
And that goes for anybody. I like anybody I talk to, like I like form this rule, like I'm not gonna build a relationship with someone if they don't have a certain level of self-awareness.
Yeah, 100%, man. No, I think that's great, man. I think I don't want the listeners to be like, oh, those are the two things that EJ only cares about. Like, no, like what you just said is all on my list as well, man.
Mm-hmm.
I think being able to be nurturing is definitely one thing that I also look for in terms of like long-term relationship. I honestly believe that in a relationship, you go there to give. It might not always be
Mm-hmm.
easy, right? But relationships aren't easy. So I think in terms of nurturing, being able to give, being able to anticipate your partner's needs, like that is that is great. Like when you can fill up my water bottle in the morning because I don't drink water, like yo,
That's
that hits something else for me. You know what I'm saying?
facts.
So nah, man, I definitely love the nurturing. I definitely love the depth, the character. Like, does she say what she's gonna do? Like when she said she's gonna be somewhere, like does she show up? Like
Ooh,
those
so
kind of
important.
things. So I mean, that's how you facilitate a relationship, right? By making a commitment to, do what you're gonna do. If
Mm-hmm.
I can't trust your word, then this relationship isn't really built on anything, kind of. So
Facts.
yeah.
Facts. Like that is something that's so like I've stopped talking to a lot of people because they did not, follow through on commitments. Like
Oh
that's
yeah.
something, like I'm not necessarily gonna like, react to them, or like, sit there and like try to like coach them, or whatever it is, but I just will just stop interacting with someone if someone can't show up on commitments, because that's like, it really is an important thing. And what I find, integrity, like, is
Mm.
so necessary in relationships. And like, this kind of goes back to the whole confidence and arrogance thing, like a lot of things we've kind of discussed here. But like, if you're going to, mention something or say something, I believe it's pretty important to actually follow through on that. Like, and
Oh yeah.
it's such an important thing. So yeah, like I actually like thinking about like a past experience that I had with someone, and I was just like, yeah, like, they didn't follow through. Like we like set up like a date that didn't end up happening. And then the next time I saw them, they're like super nice. They're like, oh yeah, when are we gonna grab coffee? And I'm just like, it's not going to happen. Like, we already tried. And so, that's
Yeah.
something that's so important.
Yeah, man. That's a good point you bring up because that's also another thing. I mean, especially in the world of online dating and when people can meet somebody like with just a drop of the hat or a snap of the finger, like you make dates. This is when I was on the dating apps, but I would make dates. I would set a specific time, like, hey, we're gonna meet here at 12 o'clock. All right, whatever. Sounds great, right? Man, next thing you know, you don't see nobody, you don't hear nobody or
Mm-hmm.
whatever, and then they come up with like a wishy-washy excuse or whatever, and I'm just
Yeah,
like, you kind of disqualified yourself. I mean,
exactly.
when you think about a long-term relationship, like what do you think of?
Mm-hmm.
You think that person has to be consistent, right?
Facts.
Like they got to be disciplined with their own emotions. Like just because you don't feel like doing something, doesn't mean that you should just avoid it at all costs. So
Mm-hmm.
I think it's also just
Mm-hmm.
I once you start to see that in the beginning stages, I think that's what either qualifies or disqualifies somebody from a long-term relationship.
Absolutely, absolutely. So like switching gears here, because we kind of talked a little bit about things that attract in like a the beginning stages
Yeah.
relationship. So what would you say are the qualities that you found to be qualities or like skills or tools that you found to be necessary to continue a long-term relationship? Because that definitely is, a bit different than just the attraction.
Yeah, 100%. Well, while I think that in the dating stage, it's a little bit about you in determining what you want, I do think that for a long-term relationship, you have to be able to um, basically connect with that person in a way that like might be a little bit different than you're used to. So
Mm-hmm.
part of that, what I mean is that like a skill that I've had to learn as a man is sometimes women just want to hear. Women just want you to listen.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, who knew, right? but but
They want you
but
sold.
yeah, but I mean, one of the things, and I'm actually glad you asked this question is because one of the things that I know that I'm personally working on is being able to discern between when my girl wants me to listen versus when I am need or when she wants my advice, right? I think as we kind of grow as men in our fields, we become more logical, we become more disciplined, we become more driven, we become more problem solvers. We solve large large scale problems, small scale problems. When we come home, to our ladies, sometimes they just have a bad day, and our immediate thing is to solve
Oh,
that problem,
yeah.
right? Solve that problem, right? And they're
Yeah.
just like, no, like you're not listening to me. You know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
So I think that's definitely one thing that I learned in my relationships is to definitely they just sometimes they don't want a problem solved. They just want you to listen. And what comes with listening is asking quality questions. I heard somebody say this, and I think it's so true that your life is in direct proportion with the quality questions that you ask, right? So I think, as they are listening, as you're listening, tell me more. How did that make you feel? Whatever, right? And I'll tell you what, I think women tend to solve their problems by talking about them. Once
Mm-hmm.
they get it all out, they're kind of like, yo, like, I feel so much better. Thank you for listening, right? Versus, kind of getting that immediate reaction of, I need to solve that problem. So I think that's a big thing for men in particular that we got to focus on.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. And what I've found too, like I'm not in a relationship right now, but I've been learning, quite a lot about it. And this also applies a lot to the practice that I run as a financial advisor, because a lot of it's about
Mm.
relationships. But yeah, that communication, like,
Oh yeah.
communication is so important for any long-term relationship. Like, you know, people cannot read minds.
No.
And I think that's still something, I'm always learning. I'm like, okay, like it's important to, be, making sure that I'm communicating, all things relationship, making sure that you're setting expectations.
Mm-hmm.
If there's, I believe that most problems in life are usually due to either miscommunication or a lack of communication, generally.
Yeah.
And so like if something happens, even if you feel like, hey, there may be differing opinions on this, like talking about it and doing it in a healthy way, not necessarily just like if something goes wrong, like blaming that person or whatever it is. Like, I one thing that I've learned that's really helped me in my relationships is come with a curious attitude or curious like mindset. Like
Yeah.
if something happens and it looks like something, like don't be like, oh my God, you did this or whatever it is. Like be like, hey, like let me understand a little bit more about this situation. Like let me understand, because oftentimes there are like things we may not know or we may not be considering.
Yeah, absolutely. I
And
think that I think that's
mhm,
I think that's a I didn't mean to cut you off, man, but I think like
mhm,
to that point, I think that's why it's so important for you to understand your triggers and your traumas and to work on
mhm.
those, because I think that is what ultimately affects your communication and your
Yeah,
perception of like what you saw or what you heard, and that will
facts.
basically dictate how you move forward in that conversation, or even if you move
Mhm.
forward at all.
Yeah.
So, didn't mean to cut you off, but I think that's a
No,
great
yeah.
point, man.
Yeah, absolutely. And another thing that I've found like as a man is really important is decisiveness. Like,
Oof.
like yeah, yeah, right. Like, like the reality is like, and for traditional like relationships, I find that like women like a guy that is decisive.
Yeah.
And it's not about necessarily knowing, well, like, for example, I don't know. Well, the classic example of knowing where to go to eat, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
right? That's been, played out so many different times. But like it's not that you got to pick the perfect place, just pick a place.
Yeah.
It's not always about like having just make a decision because,
Mm-hmm.
especially like, what I've found to be true is that like, you know, again, like if you're in a relationship, like a woman wants to come back to a guy who's going to be a leader in some sense.
Yeah.
They want to, they go through their day, they have a lot of different stresses, especially if they're working like in a tough career. Like they're already making a lot of decisions, they don't want to go back home and be making more decisions because you know I've heard it, it's kind of funny, but like women don't want another son. Like they don't want a
No.
guy that they're leading.
No.
They don't want a guy that they're, they have to make all the decisions for. So, really working on your decisiveness. And that happens in like inside and outside relationships. Like when you're, going through making decisions about your life, it could be simple things, but just working on like just being more confident in your decision making abilities. And knowing, hey, like that doesn't mean you have to, make the right decision every single time, but just deciding you're able to now follow a path and
Yeah.
go down that road.
Yeah.
So, I'm curious because we are right on the cusp of this, but we definitely have gone into like a whole nother dating environment that like 30-40 years ago just wasn't the case, right? Like
Yeah.
before going on like dating apps were like I know like 20 years ago, and then probably even less than that, people, if you're on a dating app, people are like, wait, what? Like you don't go
Yeah.
out
It's
and
like
meet
a
a person
foreign thing to them.
in
Yeah.
real life. Yeah. And nowadays, like it's just common. Like almost everyone has, Hinge, Tinder, all those different things on their phone. So like what is your, opinion just overall on dating apps? Like, do you feel like it's been beneficial for like
Mm.
actually getting into long-term relationships? I have a lot of thoughts on this, but I'm curious to hear your
Yeah.
thoughts.
Yeah. Yeah, man. No, I think I would say my experience with dating apps hasn't gone that great. And I
Mm-hmm.
also think that dating apps today, I don't know if it's necessarily a mystery to people, but I mean, I've heard this a lot where women tend to have these standards for guys, right?
Mm-hmm.
And these standards tend to be, 6 feet tall, six figures, like all that kind of stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
So on the dating apps, if you are an average guy, meaning, okay, let's say you make an average salary. What's the average salary in US? Like
Like
50,000,
60.
something like that.
Yeah,
60?
60,000.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So 60,000, you're probably what, like 5'7" or whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
Women have set their criteria, especially on height, for 6 feet, which means that I'd say that X's out like 3/4 of like the guys, you know what I'm saying? Like, and the thing is, to me, it's kind of conveyed like women are really kind of looking for the top tier of men on the dating apps, which really puts like 75% of guys at a disadvantage, right?
Mm-hmm.
So to me, it might be working well for the woman, but it might not be working so well for the men. And I would also say too that the men that women want off of those dating apps, they're having all the fun. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? Like
Yeah. There's a
the
reason
top
for
10% of
themselves.
dudes, the top
Yeah.
15% of dudes, like they're cleaning up, and they're the type of guys that don't want to commit because they're having so much fun. It's like them being in a candy store,
Mm-hmm.
right? So to answer your question, no, like I don't think dating apps are really leading towards like fulfilling long-term relationships, and I think it's probably because of the superficial,
Yeah.
like the superficial standards of which we've kind of placed. And I think same thing for men too. I mean, we fall in love through our eyes usually. So if somebody who you might really be compatible with doesn't look the part 100%, like that X's them out too. So
Yeah.
I think dating apps have been a little bit of a harder struggle for most out there. But I'm curious to your thoughts.
Yeah, absolutely. So I definitely agree with the fact of the superficiality there. I really feel like social media dating apps has really made like relationships and mating like really superficial. Like nowadays people are just like, all right, like, again, they're looking at the resume and not actually seeing the deeper person behind that. Like it's just so easy to, swipe left or swipe right. Oh yeah, that guy's not 6 foot. Oh yeah, that that woman doesn't have, she is not a 10 or whatever it is. And it's
Mm-hmm.
just like you really skip over like the deeper elements of a person. And one thing that I found that I just found this to be super interesting. I heard this the other day. I was listening to a different podcast, but like dating apps have really, you know, made like people more disposable, like in a
Oh
sense.
yeah.
That's like it's created this like uh kind of mindset that like, oh yeah, like you can just like, you have the option so you can just swipe to the next person, and
Yeah.
like there's no sense of commitment anymore. And even in like, relationships, like people like face one conflict and they're like, oh well, I don't have to work through this, I can just go back on Tinder and find a new person. And there's
Yeah.
no sense of like, real commitment. Like, hey, like, the reasons why like a lot of relationships, you know 40, 50 years ago like are still sustained are not because like they were perfect, not because they are ideal. In fact, there was probably like a lot more things going on because people didn't have all this knowledge about emotional stability and all the things we have access to today. But it was
Mm.
really more so because like they were committed. Like they were like,
Yeah.
hey, like, I mean, it kind of made sense. Like you get together, you're in this small town, you find your girl. You're not gonna have essentially, so you're like, hey, like I'm gonna work through this, like I'm gonna stay married and I'm gonna make sure that this works, long term.
Yeah.
And then too, like I feel like it's just the fallacies of like over choice, or like the too much choice, right?
Yeah.
Like you walk into an ice cream shop and you see vanilla, chocolate, and cookies and cream. You're gonna find your favorite flavor out of those three, pick it, and you're gonna be satisfied.
Yep.
you
Facts.
know, yeah. But if you go to the ice cream shop where it has Rocky Road, strawberry, cheesecake, all these different flavors, first off, it's going to take you an hour just to decide what you actually want.
Yeah.
And you're going to be like, man, like, should I get one scoop or two?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Should I get the sprinkles on the side? And then you're like, then you get your ice cream. And then while you're eating your ice cream, you're thinking, man, maybe I should have gotten the chocolate fudge.
Yep. Yep. And
And
it
that's
makes you less appreciative of your choice, you
exactly,
know?
yeah.
Yeah.
And dating has become, and it's like, it's really, I don't, it's not a healthy mindset to have because, like, I believe, one thing I've realized, even in my own dating experience, is that like guys are generally attracted to like novelty. Like that's
Mm-hmm.
just the reality. Like we are attracted to novelty, and there is that like almost innate like uh not, I wouldn't say or innate desire to like go out there and you know cook up with multiple people, right? But in order
Yeah.
to have a long-term relationship, you have to be like comfortable with like sustained like you have to be comfortable with like being with the same person. You have to be comfortable with like, hey, like there may not be as much novelty, and you have to like create those desires. And
Yeah.
that sense of novelty like is always going to be there, but that's not necessarily the quality that is going to really create a long-term stable relationship. And
Yeah.
you have to like, learn discipline and learn how to control your desires and
Oh man.
really say like, hey, like, I'm gonna pick the right person, or I'm gonna, think about what I ideally want, list my qualities out, find someone that has this thing, but also like know that, I may create a relationship with someone and someone else may come along, but that doesn't mean I should just go
Yeah.
chase that.
Discard. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, man. I'm really glad you brought that up because I think that is a struggle with guys. Like I've even had to think about it myself. I'm like, does this like, and I don't even know if I call it attraction, but like when I see a pretty girl or something like that, like I'm just like, damn, like, is that ever gonna go away as a guy? You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
And honestly,
Mm-hmm.
like I've talked to my dad about this, and he was like, no, it never goes away. Like,
Mm-mm.
you're always going to be biologically driven to the female body if that's what you prefer. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? And so I think a lot of guys, what they try to do is suppress that
Mm-hmm.
feeling, and then that's when they become the really nice guys, and they're just and they're almost kind of fighting a trope. But I think to your point, being able to exercise that discipline and know that like, hey, these are the standards that I've laid out, and my partner is hitting everything at like like I'm good. Like I don't need to go out there and fill that void. Like I think that's a lot of things that like people or guys in particular are struggling with. But I know my strengths. What's that personalysis? It's Clifton strength, right? So
Mm.
Clifton strength I find is a very helpful tool like for professional and personal. And I know that some of my top strengths were like, discipline, consistency, analytical, all those kind of things. You might think I'm from a military family, really, but like, so I've had an easier way of basically having that discipline for myself, but I know that's not true for everybody else. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I realized, in my own experience that like, yeah, like going out, like I've been with like a fair amount of women. Like I've had a lot of fun. I've, since I was in high school, I was a jock, all the things. And yeah, that stuff was exciting, being with like a different girl every month, going on, 4 or 5 dates a week, all those things. But I realized like it's fun, but it's not really fulfilling. And like,
Yeah.
I believe that's such an important, because a lot of we're really, as um millennials, because of social media and all that stuff, and generations that are, younger, like really model that like, oh yeah, go out there and conquer, right? Be with
Mm,
a bunch of different women and all those different things that like, values stability. That really doesn't work out too well.
no, not at all. No.
I think it's like it's perfectly fine to do that, like, but know what you want. And if like you are searching for like, a stable relationship, yeah, going out there and being with multiple women just isn't gonna fill that space. And like I realize that like for me, like what I value more is stability and consistency. So
Yeah.
I want to be, someone that hey, I can cultivate this great relationship with, and be with that person and create a life, not just have continuous experiences that for me, I'm realizing, hey, aren't fulfilling. Me,
Yeah.
you know, sleeping with hundreds of women, that really doesn't like it sounds nice, but at the end of the day, like, if you're for me personally, like I felt realized that hey, if I'm still like, alone and not like with somebody where like I'm really building towards something, I'm not really satisfied. Like
Yeah.
one night stands, they get a little old.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah, man. Facts. I mean, I've gone through that too of, dating multiple women at once. And,
Mhm.
I mean, sure, it sounds good on the surface, but that's also like emotional energy that you need to manage. You know what I'm
Fact.
saying? Like, and I think the biggest thing that I found with that was it was taking away from the energy that I had to fulfill my purpose, to be the best at my job, to be the best at, fulfilling my hobbies, fulfilling, my cup. I was essentially just kind of dispersing that in like, multiple women's cups. And I was like, this ain't fun. I was like, I don't feel myself. You know what I'm saying? So it depends on what your outcome is. But I'm like you, where I like the stability and the consistency, where you just have, one woman that you can trust. She can be your backbone. She can help you out. I think it's a lot easier to kind of hit your goals when you just have one, person that you're committed to.
Oh yeah, that's such another important point I realized there, that like, if you're especially someone that's like highly ambitious, like you have a lot of different things, or you own a business, like stability is really important if you have a lot of volatility in other places of your life.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like it is so true. And it's just like it's funny because I see the same thing like with investing, right? Like you don't want to be just, volatile, super risky in every other space you're in. You want some stability in life. You want some things, like, especially if you have, uncertainty in other places, you want some certainty, in other places. You don't, like, if you just have a bunch of uncertainty in every space in life, you're just going to be super anxious all the time. You're not going to know.
Yeah, you're going to be living in chaos.
Yeah.
No
one wants that.
No one wants that.
So as we wrap up here, really appreciate having you on the show again, EJ. What are maybe like three of the biggest things, like, I want to give you a scenario, like, let's say that you're maybe talking to, like, your future son or daughter, if you want to have kids, or let's say future son, because we're, kind of speaking, more to guys right now, in a sense.
Yeah.
What are three things that you would tell him that he should understand when it comes to building a long-term relationship and finding the right person?
Yeah, man, that's a good question. So I'd say number one, be the best version of yourself. Definitely commit yourself to excellence in those pillars that we talked about. So socially, mentally, physically, financially, and spiritually. I think as you're working on yourself in that regard, you're building yourself up to eventually lead that woman in your life, right? So I think that's number one. Number two, would be, women want to feel heard and understood, man. Like, plain and simple. Like, I think as you facilitate a long-term relationship, women tend to be more emotional and we tend to be a little bit more logical, and sometimes tend to speak different languages. So stepping outside of your mental space and to kind of say, hey, like, let's get this communication thing down right. What are you feeling? All that stuff. So basically being heard and understood, I think that's number two. Number three, enjoy life. You know what I'm saying? Like, enjoy life.
Yeah.
Like, people tend to radiate positive energy and attract positive energy, right? So live in your purpose, live your hobbies. Honestly, I think that's how a lot of people today who meet in the real world, like, meet. They're doing a hobby that they want to do, and they meet somebody else who's got the same level of interest.
Yeah.
I think that sets you up more for success versus, the dating apps that we talked about earlier. So I would say those would be the three things I would tell my son about, facilitating a long-term relationship.
I love it, man. I appreciate you sharing that. And how would you describe someone who is, breaking through their glass ceiling?
What do you mean? What do you mean by that?
Yeah. So how would you describe someone who's, breaking through the glass ceiling, excelling in places in life? Like, what is your, I guess, philosophy or thoughts on like what someone would be doing when they are kind of pushing the envelope and excelling? Like, how would you describe someone that is, breaking through the glass ceiling and excelling?
Yeah, I mean, I would describe that person as very intentional, right? So just very intentional. And I think success is built off of those small repetitions of succeeding, right? That gives you the ultimate confidence to break through that ceiling. So when I think about somebody who's breaking through that ceiling, whether it be in those 4 pillars, I would just say set small goal for yourself. Kind of get those successful repetitions, and next thing you know, you're hitting your goals and more. So I would say that.
I love it. Well, man, I really appreciate having you on the show. And I know that you're, currently working on, you already got your certification for, athletic training. So I know that you're currently kind of building that side and, helping guys make sure that they're, really moving in the right direction physically to live the most fulfilling life that they can. So I'm sure people are probably going to hear more about you, the great guy that you are. What are great ways that people can potentially connect with you, just to chat, or even maybe, maybe they want to hire you as a awesome.
Yeah, man. I mean, the best way to connect is my Instagram. So it's Euge Jacobs. So EUG Jacobs, JACOBS. You can hit me up there. More than happy to chat, but definitely appreciate the time, bro. This was a great conversation.
Yeah, same here. I appreciate you coming on. This is awesome. Sweet. Well, we will see you guys soon on Breaking the Glass Ceiling.